The transport shuttle descended through the thick clouds of Krell 7, its engines humming softly as Cadet Emma Price pressed her face against the small window. Below her stretched endless forests of purple vegetation and jagged mountain ranges that looked like broken teeth against the horizon. This moon was supposed to be their final test before graduation from the Galactic Military Academy. Emma glanced at her squad mates sitting across from her. There was Krell, an insectoid from Theta Prime, his mandibles clicking nervously as he checked his survival pack for the third time. Next to him sat Yenna, a blue-skinned female from the water world of Aquos, her gills fluttering with each breath. Beside Emma sat Drac, a massive reptilian whose people were known for their strength and honor. They had trained together for 2 years, become friends, and now they would face their final challenge as a team. 5 days, Drac rumbled in his deep voice. 5 days of survival, evasion, and resource gathering. Then we graduate. Emma nodded and smiled. We've got this. We've trained for worse. The shuttle's loading ramp hissed open and cold air rushed into the cabin. Their instructor, a stern veteran named Lieutenant Voss, stood at the entrance. This is your drop zone. You have basic supplies, a distress beacon for true emergencies only, and your training. The extraction point is 40 kilometers north. You have 5 days. Don't disappoint me. One by one, they jumped down onto the soft purple moss that covered the ground. The shuttle lifted off immediately, leaving them in the quiet wilderness. The forest around them was alive with strange sounds, chirping, rustling, and distant calls from creatures they had studied but never seen. Emma adjusted her pack and pulled out her navigation device. Okay, team, let's move north and find shelter before dark. According to the briefing, there should be caves about 3 kilometers from here. They moved through the forest in formation, just as they had practiced. Drac took point with his superior strength. Krell scouted the flanks with his excellent vision, Yenna monitored their supplies, and Emma navigated and coordinated. Everything was going according to plan. The first day passed without incident. They found the caves, set up a secure camp, and took turns on watch. Emma fell asleep listening to Krell tell stories about his homeworld, where the sky was always filled with 3 moons. The second day started well. They made good progress through the forest, marking their path and identifying edible plants. Around midday, they stopped near a small stream to refill their water containers. Emma was kneeling by the water when Krell's scream pierced the air. She spun around just in time to see something shimmer in the air behind Yenna. It wasn't quite invisible, but almost, like heat waves rising from hot ground. The shimmer moved with terrible speed, and suddenly Yenna's head was separated from her body. "Ambush!" Drac roared, reaching for his training weapon. But training weapons were useless against whatever was attacking them. Emma saw another shimmer appear behind Krell. She shouted a warning, but she was too slow. Krell fell, his chest torn open by invisible claws. Drac charged at one of the shimmers, his massive fists swinging. For a moment, Emma thought he might land a hit. Then the shimmer moved aside with ease, and something long and sharp emerged from the distortion, piercing Drac's throat. Her friend collapsed, choking on his own blood. Emma ran. She didn't think, didn't plan. She just ran. Behind her, she heard sounds of feeding, terrible wet sounds that would haunt her dreams. Her heart pounded in her chest as she crashed through the purple underbrush, branches whipping at her face. A burning pain shot through her left arm. She looked down to see 3 deep gashes from her shoulder to her elbow. One of them had caught her. She pushed herself harder, running until her lungs burned and her legs felt like rubber. She finally collapsed in a hollow beneath a massive tree root. Emma pressed her hand against her wounded arm, trying to stop the bleeding. Her mind raced. This wasn't part of the exercise. The Academy wouldn't use lethal force. Something had gone terribly wrong. She forced herself to calm down and think. Her medical training kicked in, and she used her emergency kit to clean and bandage the wound. It hurt badly, but it wasn't life-threatening if she kept it clean. Once her arm was wrapped, Emma allowed herself to think about what had happened. Those shimmers. She had seen something like that in her studies. The Korvax, a species that hunted sentient beings for sport. They used advanced cloaking technology and considered it the ultimate test of skill to hunt other intelligent creatures. They were supposed to be rare, operating in the lawless regions of space far from civilized worlds. But they were here, on a training moon, hunting cadets. Emma checked her communication device. Smashed. Must have happened when she fell during her escape. She pulled out her emergency beacon, but then stopped. The extraction wasn't scheduled for 3 more days. Even if she activated it now, help might not arrive in time. And the Korvax would certainly notice the signal. She sat in the hollow as darkness fell around her, listening to every sound in the forest. How many were there? Why were they here? And most importantly, could she survive 3 days against hunters who had killed her entire squad in seconds? Emma thought about her grandfather back on Earth, who had taught her to hunt deer in the Montana wilderness when she was just a girl. He always said that hunting wasn't about being the biggest or the strongest. It was about being patient, understanding your prey, and using your environment. She looked down at her bandaged arm, then back toward where her friends had died. Rage and grief welled up inside her, but she pushed them down. Emotions could come later. Right now, she needed to survive. Emma began moving through the dark forest, careful and quiet. She found a spot overlooking the area where the ambush had occurred. In the dim light of Krell 7's 2 small moons, she saw them. 10 figures, tall and muscular, their cloaking devices deactivated now that they felt safe. They were examining her friends' bodies, taking trophies, 10 of them. 10 against 1 wounded human cadet. Emma watched them for hours, noting how they moved, how they communicated, their patterns and habits. She memorized everything. When they finally left, she crept down to where her friends lay. She whispered apologies as she took their ID tags and salvaged what equipment remained. Yenna's water purification tablets, Krell's climbing gear, Drax's field knife. As dawn broke over Krell 7, Emma Price made her decision. She could hide for 3 days and hope they didn't find her, or she could do something else entirely. She looked at the blood trail the Korvax had left, following them back to wherever they were camped. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. Sometimes, girl, the deer becomes the hunter. Emma checked Drax's knife, feeling its weight in her hand. You want to hunt? She whispered to the empty forest. Let me show you how humans hunt. She began to follow their trail, moving like a ghost through the purple trees. Emma moved through the forest like a shadow, following the trail the Korvax had left behind. They were confident. Too confident. They hadn't bothered to hide their tracks because they didn't think a single human cadet posed any threat. That would be their first mistake. She spent the entire morning just watching them from a distance. The 10 hunters had set up a camp in a clearing near a cluster of hot springs. Emma recognized the area from her mission briefing. The springs were heated by volcanic activity deep beneath the surface, and the steam they produced was thick and constant. The Korvax seemed to enjoy the warmth, lounging around their camp without their cloaking devices active. Emma studied each one carefully. She noted which ones were larger and likely stronger. She watched how they interacted, trying to identify their leader. One of them, taller than the others with distinctive red markings on his armor, seemed to give orders that the others followed. She made a mental note, but more importantly, she studied the one who stayed separate from the group. He was smaller than the others, perhaps younger. He kept to the edge of the camp and seemed less experienced. When the others laughed at something, he joined in late, like he was trying to fit in. He would be her first target. Emma circled around the camp, staying downwind so they couldn't catch her scent. Her grandfather had taught her that patience was the most important part of hunting. "Never rush," he used to say. "Let the animal make the mistake, not you." She found what she was looking for about half a kilometer from their camp. A field of geysers, dozens of them, scattered across a rocky plain. According to her training, these geysers erupted on a regular cycle, shooting boiling water and steam 15 meters into the air. But the ground around them was unstable, riddled with underground channels filled with acidic water. Emma spent 2 hours studying the geyser field, timing each eruption, mapping the safe paths through the area. Her engineering classes at the academy had covered geological formations, and she understood how pressure built up beneath the surface. If she could destabilize the right spots, she could turn this entire field into a deadly trap. She used Krell's climbing gear to descend into several of the geyser vents when they were dormant. Working quickly, she placed rocks and debris in strategic positions to block normal pressure release. The next time these geysers tried to erupt, the pressure would find new paths, creating unpredictable eruptions across the field. As the sun began to set, Emma positioned herself on a rocky outcrop overlooking the geyser field. She took a piece of fabric from Yenna's pack and tied it to a stick, creating a small flag. Then she waited. The young Korvax appeared right on schedule. Emma had watched him take the same patrol route 3 times during the day. He was predictable, another sign of his inexperience. He moved through the forest with his cloaking device active, but Emma could see the telltale shimmer in the fading light. She threw a rock to her left, making noise. The shimmer paused, then moved toward the sound. Emma threw another rock, this time closer to the geyser field. The Korvax followed, curious or perhaps eager to prove himself to the others. Emma jumped down from her outcrop and ran across the edge of the geyser field, making sure the hunter saw her. She heard a growl behind her and risked a glance back. The Korvax had deactivated his cloaking device, revealing a creature that stood nearly 7 feet tall, with gray scaled skin and eyes like a cat. He was grinning, showing rows of sharp teeth. He thought he had her cornered. Emma ran into the geyser field, following the safe path she had memorized. Behind her, the Korvax followed, his longer legs closing the distance quickly. She could hear his breathing, excited and eager. She leaped over a dormant geyser vent and rolled to the side. The Korvax, focused entirely on his prey, stepped directly onto the unstable ground Emma had sabotaged. The ground beneath him cracked. His expression changed from triumph to confusion, then to fear. He tried to jump back, but it was too late. The geyser erupted with 3 times its normal force, the blocked pressure finding release all at once. Boiling acidic water shot up, catching the Korvax directly in the chest and face. His scream echoed across the field. He fell backward into another vent, and the acidic water began to eat through his armor and flesh. Emma watched from her safe position as the hunter thrashed and then went still. She waited 30 minutes to be sure he was dead and that no other Korvax had heard the commotion. Then she carefully made her way to the body. The acidic water had done terrible damage, but the skull remained mostly intact. Emma used Drax's knife to separate it from the body, trying not to think too hard about what she was doing. She carried the skull back to a small cave she had found earlier, one that would serve as her base. Using the knife, she carved a single mark into the bone. 1 down. 9 to go. Emma cleaned the knife and checked her wounded arm. The bandage was dirty and needed changing. As she worked, she thought about what she had done. She had killed a sentient being. Yes, he would have killed her without hesitation. Yes, he and his pack had murdered her friends, but she had still taken a life. Her hands shook slightly as she wrapped a fresh bandage around her arm. She thought about activating her emergency beacon, calling for help. But she knew it would take hours for a rescue team to arrive, and the other 9 Korvax would find her long before then. No, she had started this, and she would finish it. Emma took the skull and carried it back toward the Korvax camp, moving silently through the darkness. She found a spot where she knew they would patrol in the morning. She placed the skull on a flat rock and arranged stones around it in a pattern. Then she used mud to write a message on the rock in the common galactic script. 9 remain. She slipped back into the shadows and waited. Just before dawn, 2 Korvax came through on patrol. They found the skull and the message. Emma watched as they examined it, heard their angry growls and shouts. They called the others, and soon all 9 remaining hunters stood around the skull of their fallen comrade. The tall one with red markings, their leader, picked up the skull and examined it carefully. He said something in their language that Emma couldn't understand, but his tone was clear. He was angry, but also intrigued. He looked out into the forest, scanning the shadows where Emma hid. For a moment, their eyes almost met, though she knew he couldn't see her. The leader threw back his head and roared a challenge into the dawn sky. The other Korvax joined him, their voices echoing through the forest. Emma smiled grimly. Good. Let them be angry. Angry hunters made mistakes. She faded back into the forest, already planning her next move. Emma spent the next day observing the Korvax from various hiding spots. Their behavior had changed completely. They no longer lounged around their camp or moved carelessly through the forest. Now they traveled in pairs, weapons ready, constantly scanning their surroundings. The leader, whose name she heard the others call as Vexthon, had organized them into a proper military formation. But Emma noticed something important. They were still hunting her using predator tactics, trying to track her movements and corner her. They didn't expect traps or ambushes. In their culture, the prey ran and hid while the hunter pursued. They couldn't imagine that their prey had become the hunter. That afternoon, Emma made her way to a different part of the forest where the magnetic storms were strongest. Her academy training had covered the unique weather patterns of Krell 7. Every few hours, powerful magnetic pulses swept across certain areas of the moon, strong enough to disrupt electronic equipment and navigation systems. The Korvax armor had electronic components, including their cloaking devices and communication systems. She found a ridge overlooking a narrow valley where the magnetic interference would be strongest. Emma gathered loose rocks and positioned them at the top of the ridge, ready to create a landslide. Then she settled in to wait, chewing on a protein bar from her dwindling supplies. 2 Korvax entered the valley just as the sun reached its highest point. Emma recognized one of them from the camp, a hunter with a distinctive scar across his shoulder. They were searching methodically, checking every cave and hollow. Emma waited until they were directly below her position. Then she activated her emergency beacon for exactly 3 seconds before shutting it off. The brief signal was enough. Both Korvax turned toward her position, their hunting instincts taking over. They activated their cloaking devices and began climbing the ridge. Emma could see the shimmer of their forms moving upward. She counted silently, waiting for the right moment. The magnetic storm hit with a crackling sound that filled the air. Both Korvax suddenly became visible as their cloaking devices failed. Their armor sparked and smoked, the electronic systems overwhelmed by the magnetic pulse. They looked at each other in confusion and anger. Emma didn't give them time to recover. She pushed the pile of rocks, starting a landslide that cascaded down the ridge. The scarred Korvax tried to dodge, but lost his footing on the steep slope. He tumbled down with the rocks, his body breaking against the stones. The second Korvax managed to grab onto a ledge, hanging on as rocks bounced past him. He looked up and saw Emma standing at the top of the ridge, silhouetted against the sky. He roared in fury and began climbing toward her with impressive speed, despite his damaged armor. Emma had prepared for this. She had tied a length of cable from Krell's climbing gear between 2 trees at the top of the ridge. As the Korvax pulled himself over the edge, she yanked on the cable, pulling it tight at ankle height. The hunter tripped and fell forward. Emma was ready with Drax's knife. She didn't hesitate. Her blade found the gap in his armor at the neck, the same weak point she had noticed when studying their equipment. The Korvax made a gurgling sound and collapsed. Emma sat down heavily, her hands shaking. 2 more dead. She had now killed 3 sentient beings in 2 days. She thought about her ethics classes at the academy, about the rules of warfare and engagement. But those rules assumed both sides were following them. The Korvax were hunting for sport, killing for pleasure. This wasn't war, this was survival. She retrieved both skulls and marked them with tallies. 3 down, 7 to go. That night, Emma found a small spring where she could refill her water containers. As she treated the water with Yenna's purification tablets, she had an idea. The Korvax would need water, too. They had to drink, and there were only a few clean water sources in this part of the forest. She checked her supplies. Among Yenna's things, she found a container of chemical waste neutralizer used to make contaminated water safe to drink. But Emma knew from her chemistry classes that in high concentrations, this chemical became toxic. It wouldn't kill immediately, but it would cause severe illness within hours. Emma spent the next morning visiting every water source within 5 kilometers of the Korvax camp. Most of them were too large or too active to contaminate effectively, but she found one small pool fed by an underground spring. The water was crystal clear and cool, exactly the kind of source that experienced hunters would choose. She poured the entire container of concentrated chemicals into the pool, watching as it dispersed in the water. There was no visible change, no smell. Perfect. Emma climbed a tree overlooking the pool and waited. She had to be patient. It took 6 hours before a lone Korvax approached the pool. He scanned the area carefully, his weapon ready. After several minutes of checking his surroundings, he deactivated his cloaking device and knelt by the water. He drank deeply, filling his containers. Emma didn't attack. She let him leave. The poison would take time to work, and she needed him to return to camp first. She followed him from a distance, moving silently through the trees. He made it back to the Korvax camp and shared his water with 2 others. Emma watched as they all drank, saw them laugh at something one of them said. 4 hours later, as night fell, she heard the sounds of distress from their camp. The 3 Korvax, who had drunk the poisoned water, were violently ill. Emma crept closer and watched from the shadows. The other 4 Korvax were trying to help their sick companions, but they didn't understand what had happened. The poisoned hunters were weakening quickly, their bodies unable to process the toxin. By midnight, one of them had died. Emma slipped into the chaos of the camp while the others were distracted and claimed his skull. She left it at the edge of their camp with a new message written in mud. 6 remain. Your water is not safe. Your camp is not safe. Nowhere is safe. The next target came easier than Emma had expected. While exploring a series of caves to hide her growing collection of skulls, she found an entire section that was unstable. The ceiling was supported by natural pillars of rock that had been weakened by erosion. A few well-placed strikes with a heavy stone, and the entire chamber would collapse. Emma set up her trap carefully. She left obvious signs of her presence in the cave, including a piece of torn fabric from her uniform. Then she hid in an alcove near the entrance and waited. A Korvax hunter found the signs within hours. He was being careful, moving slowly into the cave with his weapon ready. But his caution worked against him. He went deep into the chamber, searching for Emma. She emerged from her hiding spot and used a large rock to strike the support pillars. The sound echoed through the cave. The Korvax turned and ran toward the exit, but he was too far in. The ceiling collapsed with a thunderous roar, burying him under tons of rock. Emma didn't bother trying to dig out the body. She simply carved a mark on the cave wall near the entrance. 5 remain. That night, Back in her hidden camp, Emma sat with 4 skulls arranged in front of her. Her wounded arm throbbed with pain despite the bandages. She was running low on supplies and hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. Her body was covered in bruises and cuts from moving through the forest, but she was alive, and more importantly, she was winning. Emma pulled out her communication device, the one that had been smashed during her escape. Using tools from her survival pack, she tried to repair it. If she could get even a weak signal out, she could call for help. But the damage was too severe. The main circuit board was cracked beyond repair. She threw the useless device aside and lay back against the cave wall. 2 more days until the scheduled extraction. She just had to survive 2 more days and eliminate 5 more hunters. Emma closed her eyes and thought of her grandfather. She remembered a time when she had missed a shot at a deer and felt terrible about wounding it. Her grandfather had made her track the animal for hours until they found it and ended its suffering properly. "Once you pull the trigger, Emma," he had said, "you're responsible for seeing it through, no matter how hard it gets. That's what separates hunters from killers. Hunters finish what they start." Emma opened her eyes and looked at the skulls. "I'll finish this," she whispered. "I promise." The next morning brought rain. Heavy drops fell through the purple canopy, turning the forest floor into slick mud. Emma welcomed it. Rain would mask her scent and cover her tracks, but it would also make the remaining 5 Korvax more desperate and dangerous. She had noticed something important the previous evening. The hunters were no longer operating independently or in pairs. They had grouped together, moving as a coordinated unit. Vexthon, their leader, had learned from her attacks. He understood now that she was picking them off one by one, and he had adapted his strategy. This made everything more difficult. Emma couldn't use the same tactics anymore. 5 trained hunters working together were exponentially more dangerous than 5 individuals. She needed to change her approach. Emma spent the morning moving through the rain, searching for anything she could use. Her body ached with exhaustion, and the wound on her arm had started showing signs of infection despite her efforts to keep it clean. She knew she was running out of time in more ways than one. That's when she found the crashed supply ship. It was half buried in a ravine, hidden beneath decades of plant growth. The hull was cracked open, exposing the cargo bay. Emma climbed inside carefully, searching through the wreckage. Most of the supplies were ruined by time and weather, but she found several items that were still intact. Medical supplies, including antibiotics and fresh bandages. Emma immediately treated her infected wound, injecting the medicine and wrapping her arm properly for the first time in days. The relief was immediate. She also found emergency rations, which she ate hungrily. Her body desperately needed the calories, but the most valuable discovery was a crate of mining explosives, the kind used to blast through rock. There were 6 charges, each small enough to carry but powerful enough to bring down a cliff face. Emma carefully packed the explosives into her bag, along with the detonators and wiring. An idea was forming in her mind. If the Korvax wanted to hunt as a pack, she would give them prey worth pursuing. She spent the afternoon in the crashed ship, resting and recovering her strength. As she ate another ration pack, she pulled out the ID tags of her fallen squadmates. Yenna, Krell, Drac. She read their names quietly, remembering their faces, their voices, their dreams. "I'm doing this for you," she said to the empty ship. "They killed you like you were nothing, like you were just animals to be hunted. I'm going to make sure they understand the cost." Emma activated her medical scanner and used it to record a message. She spoke clearly, explaining everything that had happened. The ambush, the Korvax hunters, her decision to fight back. She described each encounter, each death, not with pride, but with honest clarity. "I'm not doing this for revenge," she said into the recorder. I'm doing it because if I don't stop them here, they'll just hunt more cadets, more students, more innocent people. Someone has to draw the line. Someone has to say that humans aren't prey. We're not trophies for anyone's wall. She saved the message to the medical scanner's memory and tucked it into her jacket. If she didn't survive, at least someone would know what happened here. As evening approached, Emma made her way to a canyon she had scouted earlier. It was narrow, with steep walls on both sides and only one entrance. The perfect place for a trap, if you were willing to take a massive risk. She spent hours setting up the explosives. She placed them along both walls of the canyon, hiding them under rocks and debris. She wired them all to a single detonator that she could trigger remotely. The setup was crude, but it would work. When the charges went off, the entire canyon would collapse inward. The question was how to lure all 5 Korvax into the canyon at once. Emma sat down and thought carefully. She needed something that would make them abandon their caution, something that would force them to act immediately. Then she realized what it was, herself. She would have to be the bait. Emma positioned herself at the far end of the canyon, in clear view of the entrance. Then she built a fire, the first one she had dared to make since the ambush. The smoke rose into the evening sky like a signal flare. She was announcing her location to anyone watching. Then she waited. It didn't take long. As darkness fell, she saw them appear at the canyon entrance. All 5 of them, led by Vexithon. They saw her sitting by the fire and stopped, clearly suspicious. This was too easy, too obvious. Vexithon shouted something in his language. Emma didn't understand the words, but she understood the meaning. He was calling her out, challenging her. Emma stood up slowly. She picked up a stick and threw it at her feet, a gesture of defiance. Then she turned and started running deeper into the canyon. Behind her, she heard their roars. They charged into the canyon, their desire to catch her overwhelming their caution. Emma ran as fast as she could, her wounded arm burning with pain. She could hear them gaining on her, their heavy footsteps echoing off the canyon walls. She reached the end of the canyon and pressed herself against the wall. There was nowhere else to go. The Korvax slowed as they approached, spreading out to block any escape. They had her cornered. Vexithon deactivated his cloaking device and stepped forward. He was massive, even larger than she had thought. His red markings seemed to glow in the dim light. He said something else in his language, and this time Emma thought she caught the meaning. He was offering her a chance to die with honor, to face him in combat, rather than be executed like cornered prey. Emma pulled out the detonator from her jacket. Vexithon's eyes widened as he realized what it was. He shouted a warning to his hunters and turned to run, but they were too far into the canyon, too close to the walls. Emma pressed the button. The world exploded in sound and fury. The charges detonated in sequence, each one triggering a cascade of falling rock. The canyon walls collapsed inward, tons of stone falling from above. Emma threw herself into a small alcove she had found earlier, covering her head with her arms. The roar of the collapse lasted for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Dust filled the air, making it impossible to see or breathe. Emma coughed and gasped, her lungs burning. When the dust finally settled, Emma crawled out of her alcove. The canyon was completely changed. Where there had been a clear path, there was now a massive pile of rubble and broken rock. She couldn't see any of the Korvax. She climbed over the debris carefully, searching. She found the first body quickly, crushed beneath a boulder. Then a second, and a third. Both were dead, their armor cracked and broken. Emma sat down heavily on a rock, her entire body shaking. 7 dead. 7 Korvax hunters eliminated. Only 3 remained, including Vexithon. But as she searched through the rubble, she couldn't find the other 2 bodies. She looked everywhere, moving rocks and debris. They weren't there. That meant Vexthon and at least one other hunter had escaped the collapse. Emma's heart sank. She had used her best trap, spent all her explosives, and she had still failed to finish them. And now Vexthon would be more cautious than ever. He would know all her tricks. She claimed the 2 skulls from the dead hunters and marked them. 7 total now. But it felt like a hollow victory. As Emma limped away from the canyon, her wounded arm throbbing and her body covered in new cuts and bruises, she heard something that made her blood run cold. A howl echoed through the forest. Then another joined it. Vexthon and his remaining hunter were calling out, their voices full of rage and pain and a terrible determination. The hunt was no longer about sport. It was personal now. Emma had 1 day left until extraction. 1 day to survive against 2 experienced hunters who now knew exactly how dangerous she was. She touched the ID tags in her pocket and whispered a prayer to whatever gods might be listening. Then she disappeared into the darkness, already planning her next move. Dawn broke over Krail 7 with a strange purple light that filtered through the morning mist. Emma sat in a tall tree overlooking the extraction point, her body exhausted beyond anything she had ever experienced. Her infected arm had improved with the antibiotics, but new injuries covered her body. Bruises, cuts, and scrapes marked every encounter with the hunters. She had maybe 12 hours until the rescue ship arrived. Somewhere in the forest below, Vexthon and 1 other Korvax were hunting her. They had tracked her through the night, never giving her more than an hour of rest. Every time she tried to sleep, she would hear them moving through the darkness, searching. Emma knew they had changed their approach. They weren't trying to kill her quickly anymore. They were wearing her down, exhausting her, making her too tired to think or plan. It was a smart strategy. She respected Vexthon for adapting so well, but respect wouldn't keep her alive. She climbed down from the tree and checked her remaining supplies. 1 protein bar, half a bottle of water, Drax's knife, and 7 Korvax skulls that she had hidden in a cave near the extraction point. She had no more traps, no more explosives, no more tricks. Emma made her way to the extraction point, a flat clearing surrounded by tall trees. The rescue ship would land here at sunset. She just had to survive until then. She spent the morning setting up her final defensive position. Using fallen branches and rocks, she created several small barriers around the clearing. They wouldn't stop a determined attacker, but they would slow them down and give her precious seconds to react. She positioned herself with her back to a large boulder that protected her from behind. Then she waited. The sun climbed higher in the sky. Birds called from the trees. The forest seemed peaceful, but Emma knew better. They were out there, watching, planning their final attack. Around midday, she saw movement at the edge of the clearing, a shimmer in the air that marked a cloaking device. Emma gripped her knife and prepared herself. The shimmer moved closer, then stopped. A voice called out in broken but understandable human language. "Human Cadet, I am Vexthon. I wish to speak." Emma stayed silent, watching carefully for any sign of a trap. The cloaking device deactivated, and Vexthon stepped into view. He was alone, his weapons holstered. His armor was damaged from the canyon collapse, and she could see injuries on his arms and chest. He looked tired, just like she felt. "You fight well," Vexthon said, his accent thick but clear. "You have killed 7 of my hunt pack, 7 warriors who have hunted across many worlds. This is not easy thing." "What do you want?" Emma asked, her voice rough from days without proper rest. "I want to offer honorable combat. You and me, single fight. If you win, my last hunter will let you leave. If I win, you die as warrior, not as prey." Emma studied him carefully. Was this a trick? But what did it matter? Even if she refused, they would attack anyway. At least this way, she only had to fight 1 at a time. "What about your other hunter?" she asked. Vexthon gestured to the trees. The second Korvax appeared, also deactivating his cloaking device. He was younger than Vexthon, with fewer scars. He bowed his head slightly toward Emma. He watches only. He not interfere. This is our law. Leader fights, pack respects result. Emma thought about it for a moment, then stood up from behind her boulder. Okay, but no cloaking devices, no armor advantages, just skill. Vexthon smiled, showing his sharp teeth. He began removing pieces of his armor, stripping down to just basic clothing. Emma noticed he moved stiffly, favoring his left side. The canyon collapse had hurt him more than he wanted to show. They faced each other in the center of the clearing. Vexthon was nearly 2 feet taller than Emma and probably outweighed her by 100 pounds. His reach was longer, his strength greater. In a straight fight, he would win easily. But Emma hadn't survived this long by fighting fair. Vexthon attacked first, moving with surprising speed despite his injuries. Emma dodged backward, using her smaller size to her advantage. His clawed hand missed her face by inches. She countered with her knife, aiming for his injured side. He blocked the strike and swept his leg toward hers. Emma jumped over it and rolled away, putting distance between them. They circled each other, each looking for an opening. Vexthon attacked again, a series of powerful strikes that drove Emma backward. She blocked what she could and dodged the rest. But one blow caught her shoulder and sent pain shooting down her arm. Emma realized she couldn't win through strength or endurance. She was already too tired, too injured. She needed to end this quickly. She pretended to stumble as if exhausted. Vexthon saw the opening and lunged forward, going for a killing strike. But Emma's stumble had been fake. She dropped low beneath his attack and drove her knife upward, finding the gap in his natural armor at his armpit. The blade sank deep. Vexthon roared in pain and backhanded Emma across the clearing. She hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the wind from her lungs. Vexthon pulled the knife from his side, blood flowing freely from the wound. He looked at the blade, then at Emma, then back at the blade. His expression was unreadable. "Clever," he said quietly. "Very clever." He took a step toward her, then another. Each step seemed to cost him effort. Emma tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. She was too tired, too hurt. Vexthon stood over her, the knife in his hand. He could kill her easily now. She waited for the final strike. Instead, he drove the knife into the ground beside her head. "You win, human. Not because you stronger, not because you better warrior. You win because you understand true hunting. You adapt. You survive. You turn weakness into strength." He turned to his remaining hunter and spoke in their language. The younger Korvax looked shocked, but nodded and bowed. Vexthon looked back at Emma. "My hunter will not harm you. You have earned respect. You have earned life." He touched his wounded side, blood covering his hand. "I think maybe I not survive this wound. But that is fair price. Your friends deserved better than sport hunt. You teach me this lesson." He walked slowly to the edge of the clearing and sat down beneath a tree. "When your ship comes, tell them everything. Tell them Korvax hunting cult broke sacred laws. Tell them we hunted innocents for sport. This must end." Emma finally managed to stand. She walked over to Vexthon, retrieving her knife from the ground. She looked at him, this warrior who had killed her friends, who had hunted her for days. "Why did you let me win?" she asked. "I not let you win. You win fairly. You better hunter than me. I just better killer." He coughed, and blood appeared at the corner of his mouth. "There is difference. Important difference." Emma heard the sound of engines in the distance. The rescue ship was coming early, probably because they had detected the explosions from the canyon. She looked at Vexthon, then at the younger hunter standing nearby. She made a decision. "I could save you," she said. "The ship will have medical equipment." Vexthon shook his head. "No. I die with honor, accepting defeat. This is our way. But you tell them truth. You stop hunting cult. Promise me this." "I promise," Emma said. The rescue ship descended into the clearing, its landing gear crushing the small barriers Emma had built. The door opened and medical personnel rushed out, surrounding Emma. She saw Lieutenant Voss, her instructor, his face showing relief and shock. "Cadet Price, what happened? Where is your squad?" Emma pointed to the cave where she had hidden the skulls. "Dead. Murdered by Korvax hunters. Illegal sport hunt. I survived. I fought back." The medical team tried to approach Vexthon, but the younger Korvax stepped in front of him, blocking their path. Vexthon raised his hand weakly. "Let him honor his choice," Emma said. "It's their way." They loaded Emma onto the ship. As they lifted off, she looked out the window and saw Vexthon still sitting beneath the tree, his hunter beside him. The younger Korvax had his hand on Vexthon's shoulder, supporting him in his final moments. 3 months later, Emma stood in the memorial hall of the Galactic Military Academy. The 9 Korvax skulls were displayed in a glass case, but the plaque didn't celebrate her kills. Instead, it honored Yenna, Krell, and Drac, the 3 friends who had died on Krell 7. The Korvax hunting cult had been exposed and prosecuted. Dozens of illegal hunts were discovered. Laws were strengthened, and Emma had testified at every trial, keeping her promise to Vexthon. She graduated with full honors, but the ceremony felt hollow. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the forest, heard the sounds of combat, felt the weight of the knife in her hand. Her grandfather visited her after graduation. They sat together on a bench outside the academy, watching students walk past. "I heard what happened," he said quietly. "I'm sorry you had to go through that." "I did what I had to do," Emma replied, using his own words from years ago. "Yes, you did. But Emma, there's something important you need to understand. You survived, and that's good. You protected others, and that's noble. But don't let what you became on that moon define who you are forever." Emma thought about Vexthon's final words. The difference between a hunter and a killer. The line she had walked for 5 days in that purple forest. "I'm trying, Grandpa, I'm trying." He put his arm around her shoulders. "That's all any of us can do. Keep trying. Keep being human. That's what separates us from the predators." Emma nodded and leaned against him, finally allowing herself to feel safe. The hunt was over. She had survived, and somehow she would learn to live with what she had done. The skulls remained in the memorial hall, a reminder not of violence or revenge, but of the cost of survival and the value of the lives that had been lost. Emma visited them once a week, speaking quietly to her fallen friends, keeping their memory alive. That was her real victory, not the kills, not the survival, but remembering that every life, human or alien, mattered. That was the lesson worth learning.